The moon hung low and luminous, its descent more pronounced with every passing hour, casting an otherworldly glow that bathed the village of Glimmer Hollow in silver and shadow. The villagers, once filled with wonder and celebration, now stood near the water's edge, like moths drawn to a flame, eyes glazed. Movements slow and unsteady, as if caught in the wake of some irresistible tide. Ilias Maro stood among them, his knuckles white as he gripped the worn wooden post of the old pier. His gaze was locked on the shimmering reflection, the distorted visage of the moon fractured across the restless waves. A cold shiver ran down his spine, not from the chill of the night air, but from the growing sense of something deeply wrong. The lake was no longer a placid expanse of water. It was a threshold, a shifting veil between worlds, and the moon's reflection was its siren call. Beside him, Mara Lawn's sharp green eyes scanned the crowd with mounting urgency. "We don't have much time," she whispered, voice barely audible over the faint lapping of the water. "More are slipping away every hour." Elias nodded grimly, casting a glance toward a young woman who stood at the water's edge, her face pale and expression vacant. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, toes sinking into the moist earth, eyes fixed on the swirling moonlight beneath her feet. Another step, and another. "No," Elias hissed, lunging forward. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but gentle, pulling her back before she could cross the invisible boundary. She blinked, confusion flickering in her eyes, then collapsed into his arms, trembling. "You have to fight it," he urged, voice low but fierce. "The lake isn't safe. The reflection, it's not what you think." The woman's lips quivered, struggling to form words. "It's calling me." "I can't." Elias tightened his hold. "You can. You have to." Mara stepped forward, producing a small vial from her satchel. "This might help," she said urgently. "Herbs to clear the mind, ground you." Reluctantly, the woman accepted, swallowing the bitter liquid as the moonlight flickered above them. Across the pier, Sheriff Caltain arrived, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden planks. His usual stoic demeanor was cracked by a flicker of uncertainty. "What's going on here?" he barked, eyes darting to the entranced villagers. Elias turned sharply. "The moon's reflection, it's pulling them in. We have to stop it." Caltain scoffed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his doubt. "Pulling them in, that's superstition. People are just scared." "It's real," Mara said, stepping beside Elias. "I've seen it. Jonas is trapped in that liminal space beneath the reflection." The mention of Ilias's younger brother's name seemed to harden the sheriff's gaze. "We need order," he said firmly. "Chaos won't save anyone." Ilias's eyes narrowed. "Order won't stop the lake from swallowing us whole." Tension crackled between them like static electricity as the villagers continued their slow, hypnotic drift toward the water. The moon's glow intensified, ripples on the lake twisting into shapes, faint whispers of faces, hands reaching, shadows stretching. The lunar entity had grown bolder, its pull more potent. Ilias took a deep breath, forcing his trembling hands to steady. "We need to fight it," he said, voice low but resolute. "If we don't, more will be lost." Mara nodded, eyes fierce. "Then we start now." Together, they moved among the villagers, pulling those closest to the water back from the brink. Some resisted, eyes wild with confusion or fear. Others seemed unaware, caught in some trance beyond reach. The struggle was exhausting, both physically and mentally, as the air around them seemed to thicken with unseen menace. At one point, Elias found himself face to face with a man whose features twisted and blurred beneath the moonlight, a grotesque reflection of the entity's power. The man's eyes were black voids, and his voice came as a rasping hiss. "The moon calls," he whispered. "Join us beneath." Elias recoiled, pushing the man away and shouting for help. Mara and Sheriff Keltane rushed over, weapons drawn, though their resolve wavered. The confrontation left Elias shaken but undeterred. The entity was no longer content to lure. Silently it was manifesting through the villages, spreading its madness like a dark tide. As the night deepened, the wind carried faint, haunting melodies echoes of ancient curses and drowned souls. Elias clenched his jaw, fighting the rising panic within. He could feel the entity's seductive pull tugging at his own mind, threatening to unravel the fragile threads of his sanity. But he would not yield. "Not tonight. We stand together," he murmured, eyes scanning the horizon where the moon hovered dangerously low. "Or we drown alone." The lake's shimmering reflection pulsed in response, a silent challenge beneath the fading sky. And the battle for Glimmer Hollow was just beginning. As dusk crept over Glimmer Hollow, Elias found himself drawn to the water's edge once more. The sinking moon cast a hypnotic glow, its light fractured and mingled with the restless ripples. To any outsider, it would have seemed a tranquil scene, but Elias knew better. The surface shimmered with a restless energy, as if the lake itself breathed beneath the fading sky. He sat on the damp earth, knees drawn close, staring into the depths where reality seemed to blur. The whispers began again, faint yet unmistakable, a susurrus of drowned voices weaving through the rustling reeds and the lapping water. His heart hammered in his chest, an erratic rhythm that echoed the chaos inside him. The faces in the reflection shifted, fleeting and grotesque, as if the moon's light had fractured into 1,000 haunted fragments. His breath caught when a sudden chill ran down his spine. The air thickened, heavy with salt and decay, and the lake's surface rippled unnaturally, distorting the moon's reflection into a writhing, fluid shape. Elias blinked, but the vision held firm, a shifting mass of light and shadow, its edges curling like smoke, faces emerging and dissolving in a maddening dance. The world tilted as a wave of nausea swept over him. Memories disjointed and painful surged forth, the loss of Jonas, the quiet nights when the village's laughter seemed distant and hollow. The past and present collided violently, and Elias's grip on himself slipped. Later, in the dim confines of his cabin, the nightmare followed. Shadows clung to the corners, twisting into impossible forms. On the peeling wallpaper, he saw eyes endless, watery, accusing. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting distorted patterns that danced like specters. Elias pressed his hands to his temples, fighting the onslaught of visions that threatened to consume him whole. "You're losing yourself," a voice whispered, cruel and seductive. It was the lake, the moon, the entity, all entwined in a cacophony of torment. Then came Mara's knock, sharp and insistent. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside, her green eyes bright with concern. "Elias, you need to come back to yourself," she said firmly, crossing the threshold into his private hell. He looked up at her, wild-eyed and trembling. "It's all slipping away," he confessed, voice cracked and raw. "The lake, the moon. They're inside me now." Mara knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. Her touch was steady, a lifeline in the storm. "You're not alone," she assured him. "We'll face this together." Her presence was a bomb, a fragile thread tethering Elias to the world he was desperate to hold on to. She shared her own fears, stories of the village's curse and the lurking darkness beneath the water. In that small cabin, amid the shadows and whispered madness, an alliance was forged, one born of desperation and hope. The next night, they met again at the lake, the moon hanging low and swollen in the ink-black sky. The water gleamed unnaturally, alive with shimmering light that seemed to pulse in time with Ilias's ragged breaths. He stood at the edge, Mara beside him, both poised on the precipice of the unknown. A sudden wave of hallucinations crashed over Elias. The faces in the water screamed silently. The moon fractured into 1,000 shards, and the lake's depths seemed to reach out with clawing fingers. He staggered, gripping Mara's arm, struggling to anchor himself. "Hold on," she urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're stronger than this." With effort, Elias forced his mind back from the abyss, eyes blazing with a fierce determination. The madness might claw at his soul, but he would not surrender, not yet. As the moon continued its descent, casting its eerie glow over Glimmer Hollow, Elias and Mara prepared for the battles ahead, both external and within. The boundary between sanity and oblivion had thinned dangerously, and the lake waited, hungry and patient. But together, they would fight to keep the darkness at bay. And somewhere, beneath the shimmering surface, the lunar entity watched, its hunger growing with the fading sky. The night was far from over. Disappearances had become a grim rhythm each night. More souls drawn into the shimmering reflection that haunted the lake's surface, swallowed by a darkness that seemed both liquid and alive. The villagers who remained were frayed, their eyes wide with terror, their voices trembling with disbelief and despair. Elias Marrow stood at the edge of the village square, the chill night air biting through his threadbare coat. Around him, a small cluster of survivors, gathered, faces pale and drawn, eyes flickering with the fragile light of hope and fear. Mara Lawn was among them, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her green eyes sharp and unwavering even as the weight of dread pressed down upon them all. "We can't wait for the moon to swallow us whole," Elias said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We have to fight back together." Murmurs rippled through the group, a mixture of skepticism and desperate agreement. The village had fractured long ago, divided between those who clung to reason and those who saw the supernatural horror for what it was. But now, the line between belief and madness blurred like the moon's reflection on the roiling lake. Mara stepped forward, her voice low but fierce. "My brother is still trapped in that reflection. I won't lose him to this darkness without a fight. Neither will any of you." A tense silence fell, broken only by the distant splash of water, chilling reminder of the entity's reach. Sheriff Calton's heavy footsteps echoed as he approached, his gruff demeanor softened by the weight of recent horrors. "We need order," he said firmly. "Panic will be our undoing. We stick to the plan Elias and Mara lay out, or we're lost." The survivors nodded, a fragile thread of unity forming amid the chaos. Plans were made to patrol the village, to keep watch over the lake's edge, and to gather whatever knowledge could be gleaned from Old Man Harbin's cryptic tales. As the group dispersed into the night, Elias and Mara lingered by the water's edge. The moon hung low, its reflection a distorted dance of light and shadow that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. "It's like the lake itself is breathing," Elias muttered, eyes fixed on the shifting surface. "And it's hungry," Mara replied. "We have to be faster, stronger." The wind carried a faint, eerie melody, the haunting call of the lunar entity weaving through the trees and rippling across the water. Elias felt it clawing at his mind, the creeping madness whispering promises of oblivion, but he would not surrender. Not yet. Back in the makeshift refuge, the village's old church transformed into a sanctuary. Candles flickered against the cold stone walls. Survivors huddled close, sharing stories of lost loved ones and whispered prayers for salvation. Mara moved among them, her presence a beacon of strength, while Elias stood watch, the weight of their fate pressing heavily upon him. The village was shadowed, its hope fading like the dying light of the moon. But in the hearts of Elias and Mara burned a fierce determination to resist the darkness, to reclaim their home, and to face the nightmare lurking beneath the reflection. Tonight, the battle for Glimmer Hollow had truly begun. The moon's descent continued, its hypnotic glow casting long, trembling shadows over the village. And somewhere beneath the lake's surface, the lunar entity stirred, hungry, patient, and waiting for the final moment to consume all. Elias clenched his fists, staring into the depths. "We will not go quietly," he vowed. The night was far from over, and the village in shadow would soon learn the true meaning of fear. The villagers' celebrations had long since dwindled into uneasy murmurs, and now only the lake's restless lapping whispered secrets in the darkness. Elias adjusted the strap of his diving gear, his hands steady despite the gnawing unease in his chest. Mara checked her flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows like a beacon of fragile hope. "You ready?" Mara's voice was low but firm, a tremor of determination threading through her words. Elias nodded, swallowing down the lump in his throat. "We have to know. We have to see for ourselves what's beneath that reflection." The water was colder than he expected when he slipped beneath the surface, a shock that stole his breath for a moment before he settled into the rhythmic pulse of his breathing. Above him, the distorted glow of the moon fractured against the ripples, a silver eye watching silently. Mara followed close behind, their flashlights piercing the murk, revealing only fleeting shadows and drifting silt. They swam deeper, the lake's weight pressing down, until the faint outline of a cavern mouth appeared, a yawning maw etched into the underwater cliffside. Elias's heart hammered as they entered, the water around them growing still and dark, the light from their torches revealing walls slick with algae that shimmered with an otherworldly bioluminescence. Within the cavern, the walls told a story. Ancient carvings, worn yet unmistakable, spiraled in patterns reminiscent of lunar cycles, crescents, full moons, and half-shadows, interlaced with figures of drowning villagers, faces frozen in silent screams. Elias traced a trembling finger along the stone, his voice barely a whisper. These are the village elders. They made a pact." Mara's green eyes gleamed in the dim light. A pact with what? A sudden current rippled through the cavern, stirring the silt and sending a shiver through their bones. Then, shapes began to shift within the reflection of their flashlights, fluid forms coalescing into faces both human and grotesque, flickering like broken glass. The lunar entity was awakening. Elias swallowed hard, gripping Mara's arm. "We're not alone here." The entity's voice was a chorus of whispers, echoing from the depths, promising oblivion and madness. It was a fusion of light and shadow, a creature born of the moon's curse and the lake's drowning souls, hungry for more. As it advanced, the water thickened with a suffocating dread, and Elias felt the fragile line between reality and nightmare begin to blur. "We have to fight," Mara urged, her voice steady despite the terror. "If we don't, this village is lost." Elias nodded, drawing on every shred of resolve. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the soul of Glimmer Hollow itself. And beneath the fading sky, with the moon sinking ever lower, the darkness awaited them. The water closed in around them as they faced the entity, the cavern alive with ancient power and looming doom. Somewhere beyond the reflection, the village held its breath, waiting for dawn or disaster. Elias's mind raced, haunted by visions and the weight of the curse, but his will burned fierce. Whatever the cost, he would not let the moon eat the lake without a fight. And as the lunar entity's shifting form surged forward, Elias realized this was only the beginning of a deeper descent into madness, into darkness, into the heart of the nightmare itself. The moon hung low, a pale swollen orb pressed against the sky's dark canvas. Its reflection fractured and distorted across the lake's undulating surface. As he sank deeper, the ambient light waned, replaced by an eerie luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with his quickening breath. Shadows danced and writhed beneath the water, shapes shifting with a liquid grace, sometimes human, sometimes monstrous, always unsettling. His fingers grazed the jagged rocks of the cavern entrance, a yawning maw beneath the lake bed where the lunar entity made its lair. The water here felt different, thicker, almost viscous, as if reality itself had begun to unravel. Voices echoed faintly in his ears, whispers that carried both sorrow and menace, a chorus of drowned souls caught in an eternal limbo. Elias clenched his jaw, forcing his gaze forward despite the creeping madness clawing at his mind. The entity awaited, a shifting mass of light and shadow that flickered between faces, frozen in silent screams, and amorphous shapes that twisted like smoke caught in an unseen wind. It was not merely a creature, but a manifestation of the village's deepest fears and curses. Born from ancient rites and the moon's unnatural descent, its presence assaulted Ilias's senses. Memories of loss and regret surged forth, threatening to drown him in despair. He fought to steady himself, reciting the fragments of the ritual Mara had taught him, the incantations whispered by Old Man Harbin, words older than the village itself. Above the water, Mara's voice trembled but grew stronger, her talisman glowing with a faint, pulsing light that seemed to push back the darkness. The lake's surface rippled violently, the boundary between water and sky wavering as if caught in a cosmic struggle. Elias reached out, his hand trembling as it closed around the core of the entity, a swirling vortex of lunar light tangled with shadowy tendrils. The creature lashed out, tendrils wrapping around his limbs, pulling at his sanity with visions of drowning, loss, and endless night. Pain flared as his mind teetered on the brink, but he summoned every ounce of will, every memory of the village and those left behind. With a guttural cry, he wrenched free, driving a shard of fractured moonlight into the heart of the entity. A scream, both silent and deafening, echoed through the cavern, shaking the water and sky alike. The entity convulsed, its form unraveling into ripples of light that faded into the depths. Ilias's limbs went limp, his body buoyed by the returning calm, but his eyes remained open, watching, waiting. Above, Mara collapsed onto the shore, her breath ragged but steady. The lake's surface stilled, the moon's reflection returning to a fragile calm. The village's fate hung in the balance, the battle won but the war far from over. Elias surfaced, gasping, the weight of what he had faced pressing down like the dark water around him. "It's not over," he whispered, voice rough with exhaustion and resolve. "But we've bought time." The moon hovered just above the horizon, a hungry eye watching, waiting to consume the lake hole. And beneath its haunting glow, Elias knew the heart of darkness still pulsed, fragile, but alive. As dawn threatened the night, the village of Glimmer Hollow held its breath, caught between hope and the lingering shadows of lunar madness.